It's unclear how many people remain missing. At least 37 has died as a result of the heavy downpours, which have caused landslides and floods. More than 8,500 people have been ordered to evacuate. A pod of more than 50 pilot whales have died after a mass stranding on a Scottish beach. Only 15 were found alive by marine rescuers after the whales washed up at North Tulsta on the Isle of Lewis this morning, and none were able to be saved. The cause of the stranding is not yet known, but it is thought the pod may have followed one of the females which was giving birth. The government's hailing the UK joining an Indo-Pacific trading bloc, but critics say the economic benefits will be minimal. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch says the deal will bring British companies a step closer to a market of 500 million people with fewer barriers, which she hopes will open up access to £12 trillion worth of global trade. But official estimates suggest it will add just £1.8 billion a year to the economy, representing less than 1% of UK GDP. The last ship to set sail from Ukraine under the Black Sea Grain Agreement has left the port of Odessa a day before the deal expires. It allows Ukraine to safely export its grain and fertiliser while the war against Russia continues, and it's eased fears of global food shortages while stabilising prices. Russia says it won't renew the deal until Western sanctions on its own exports are lifted, but President Erdogan of Turkey, who brokered the original agreement, says he's confident it will be extended. That's it for the moment. TV, online, DAB and TuneIn Radio, this is GB News. Now it's over to Mark.
My thanks to Aaron Armstrong, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to a very busy Mark Dolan tonight. In my big opinion, after signing a stunning new trade deal worth £12 trillion, Brexit Britain is on the march and proving all the usual suspects wrong. In the big story, is Home Secretary Suella Braverman right that Labour are the political wing of Just Stop Oil? My Mark Meets guest is former Trade and Defence Secretary Dr. Liam Fox, one of the founding fathers of Brexit. He joins us live in the studio before the end of the hour. His first TV interview in a long time. It promises to be unmissable. In my Take at 10, as the BBC sex scandal rumbles on, Hugh Edwards is not the victim here. Let me tell you, this story is not going away, not on my watch. I'll be asking some tough questions that remain unanswered, and that's at 10. Also, how about this one for a debating point? Should Prince George serve in the military before becoming king? We know, of course, that Prince Harry served in Afghanistan. Prince Philip was a great war hero himself. Is it important that our monarchs and members of the royal family participate in the armed forces? Also, as London Mayor Sadiq Khan announces free school meals for every primary school pupil in London, is it the state's job to feed our kids? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former government minister Anne Widdecombe. Mark Dolan tonight is the home of the papers with tomorrow's front pages from 10:30. And let me tell you, we're expecting some big headlines, including possible developments in relation to the BBC sex scandal engulfing the organisation. Tonight we'll be getting the opinions of three top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Tonight, live in the studio, Sean Woodward, Edwina Curry and Simon Danchuk. Tonight I'll be asking the pundits, as Sir Keir Starmer refuses to say whether a Labour government would spend more money on public services, does this prove they're serious about power? Also, are restaurants that publish calorie counts on their menus killjoys? And as Brits admit to fast-forwarding through TV shows, hopefully not this one, have we lost the art of patience? Plus your emails, especially the spicy ones, mark@gbnews.com. This show has a strict golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's get to work, and we start with my big opinion. Well, who'd have thunk it? The UK has joined the Indo-Pacific trade bloc, which is now worth £12 trillion. Why does this matter? Because it gives us tariff-free trade with some of the fastest growing economies in the world. including Japan, Thailand, New Zealand, Australia and Mexico. With Britain now a member, it is a larger trading bloc than the whole of the EU. Fancy that. In practical terms, it means that British businesses can sell goods and services more competitively to these new territories, which means higher GDP, a bump in our national income, and that means more schools, more hospitals and more police on our streets. It also means that goods coming into this country, like those gorgeous Japanese cars, who doesn't love a Toyota, a Honda or a Suzuki, will be cheaper too. The CPTPP, which I thought was a cough medicine, will taste very unpalatable to the army of Remainers who dominate our political, media and public institutions. Unlike the EU, the Trans-Pacific Group is only a trading bloc. No politics, no promises of ever closer union, no micromanaging of our rules, no stifling anti-competitive laws, no input from foreign judges, no free movement, and no vast payments for the privilege of membership. Furthermore, no stranglehold over foreign trade deals like this one, no threat of the euro or the single European army, and no bill of up to £190 billion for Europe's COVID overreaction. We've joined a market now of 500 million people with economies that are growing, not in decline, as is the case in the Eurozone. And remember, people love to forget this, we do have tariff-free trade with the EU as well. Remainers would have you think exports have stopped. Far from it. As the brilliant political commentator Robert Kimball points out on Twitter, the change in UK goods exports to EU countries over the last year obliterates the idea that Brexit's a disaster. How about this? Exports to Iceland, up 29%. Exports to Norway, up 28%. Germany, up 11%. Ireland, up 18.2%. And stunningly, France, up almost 25% in a year. Vive la France. Joining this new bloc will slash red tape and see our global market share grow. It will boost jobs, it will boost investment, and it's a gold rush for our services industry, which is 80% of our economy. Now, credit must go to ex-Prime Minister Liz Truss during her tenure as International Trade Secretary. She crisscrossed the globe, promoting British business, initiating trade discussions and laying the foundations for this new deal. Well done, Liz. Credit too to our formidable Trade Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, who got this across the line. A future Prime Minister. Watch this space. And can we deal with this myth that Brexit has reduced our economy by 4% or ever will? And also this idea that the benefit of this new trade deal is 0.08%. As the top economist Catherine McBride points out, the 4% figure comes from an Office for Budget Responsibility forecast in 2018, which involved data from 2014 and was based upon the idea that we'd leave the EU on WTO terms, which of course didn't happen. So what did happen? Well, UK GDP increased from 2.24 trillion in 2019 to 2.49 trillion in 2022, an increase of 11%. Even if you take inflation into account, it is unchanged. Not bad amid the backdrop of lockdowns and a global pandemic, and certainly not a 4% hit. Listen, there are problems with Brexit. I won't gaslight the businesses struggling or indeed giving up the idea of exporting because of horrific red tape, time lags and extra costs. It really is tough for a lot of small businesses. Northern Ireland has been thrown under the bus, and culturally, it's sad that British youngsters can't suddenly decide to go to Germany or Italy and start a new career or make a new life there, and vice versa. But Brexit was a decision made by a majority of the British people, and overall, it's ageing well. With our sovereignty restored, Britain is on the march, growing its economy, growing its opportunities and trading with the rest of the world. That was the Brexit promise. It's being honoured. This new deal is a triumph and has vast potential. Not for the first time, Brexit is proving the doubters wrong. Brexit is a Brexit. Bring on Global Britain. Your reaction, do you see the other side of Brexit? Are you suffering as a result of our exit from the bloc? Do you think this trade deal is overrated? Let me know. This show's all about opinions. Let me have yours. Mark at GBNews.com. Let's get reaction now from my top pundits. Properly excited to welcome former Labour MP Sean Woodward, Edwina Currie, ex-Conservative government minister, and another ex-Labour MP and former Junior Health Minister Simon Danshut. Great to have all three of you with me. Let me start, if I can, with you, Sean. Your reaction to this new deal?
Well, look, the first thing to say is well done. We got a deal. And anything that brings more money to the UK might bring a job, terrific. But let's get this in some kind of context. This is with a group of countries which it would be great to be doing trade with. But the people on our doorstep, the European Union, and notwithstanding your excellent portrayal of Robert Kimball's figures, which was brilliant, except you only gave us one side of his picture, because what you talked about was one side of the balance sheet, and the other side of the balance sheet has been equally dreadful. So it might be the case that exports are up with France, 25%, but the average imports with the European Union are actually up 35%, which is creating a catastrophic trade imbalance. So, look, I welcome the news that we've got a trade agreement. I mean, we were promised all kinds of trade agreements in 2016. We're still waiting for one with the United States, as far as I know. And with the rest of the European Union, the tragedy is that our trade balance just 7 or 8 years ago was around 30 billion, the imbalance, and now it's grown to 3 times that amount. So I welcome the news because it's got to be good. Of course it's good if we've done a deal with somebody. But in the big picture, in the big scheme of things, it's not good enough. And that's why we are seeing in the UK a problem with our GDP. It's a complex issue, of course it is. But I'm afraid I think this is a rather distorted picture, although it's one I welcome because it's a deal.
We're struggling with our GDP more than Germany, more than the Eurozone, who are currently in recession?
Well, we can see that, for example, with what's happening with inflation. I mean, if we look at what's happening in the United States, they've seen a dramatic fall again this week, down from 4.5% now to around 3%. In the rest of the European Union, we're looking at something around about 6%. In the UK, because of our rather perverse position with Brexit, we did the deal, but we got none of the benefits. We're seeing inflation because of the imports, because of the problems we've got, inflation at around 8.5%. We've all had problems with COVID. We've all had problems as a consequence of energy prices. But the UK has done worst of all.
OK.
I don't think that's great.
Simon, it's been pointed out by others that partly we're very, very inflationary because of our exposure to the cost of energy in this country. It's a particular issue for us. Do you blame inflation on Brexit?
Well, no, I think it's far more complex. And where I take issue with what Sean is saying is in terms of growth. And you mentioned Liz Truss. She's recently set up the Growth Commission. Just last week, she set up the Growth Commission, which will focus on why we have a problem with growth in the United Kingdom. And one of the major reasons we have a problem is that lack of productivity. And that's what needs addressing. It's not just about Brexit. Productivity in the public sector is exceptionally poor in the United Kingdom. That means that taxpayers are paying a lot more tax for poorer services. So that's an issue that needs to be addressed. We do need to make more of the Commonwealth. So I welcome this agreement that's been signed. But the Commonwealth is worth a heck of a lot to us. Africa's a real opportunity for us to do business. I do agree with Sean. We've been sluggish in terms of developing trade elsewhere beyond the EU. So there's much more to be done. But it's a complex picture.
Edwina, I think we both voted Remain. But I cannot for the life of me find this Brexit disaster anywhere.
Well, whenever you have a change, whenever you have some kind of disruption, then people have got to get used to doing things slightly differently.
Plus a pandemic.
Plus the pandemic, plus the war in Ukraine, which neither of you have mentioned, for heaven's sake. So that people have to get used to doing things in a slightly different way, doing the paperwork, which, of course, should all be online, and the best companies are getting that organised. We have never really had a balance of trade in this country in the positive, right? My master's degree is in economic history. So we trade goods, and we tend, on the whole, to have a deficit with whoever we're dealing with. And what we do is we pay for it by having magnificent financial services, insurance, shipbroking, and all that kind of thing.
And the creative industries.
It's been like that for 200 years. But the inflation as well, there's a point here. I have 3 public pensions of one kind or another, because I have
brag.
a police
I've got pensions
widow's
envy.
pension. Look, 2 of them went up by over 10% in April. And that's government policy to push these, the state pension and all the rest of it. They all went up, the triple lock came into play and so on. And that means if you give a lot of people more than inflation in their pockets, they're going to spend it.
Go figure. OK, well, listen, what do you think? Is this deal a game changer, or do you share Sean's view that, frankly, it's thin gruel, given we're out of the bloc? Let me know. Mark at gbnews.com. Coming up next in the big story, is Home Secretary Suella Braverman right that Labour are the political wing of Just Stop Oil? I'll be asking an ex-Labour MP. Don't go anywhere.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Mark at gbnews.com is the email. The emails are coming in thick and fast. Clive says, "Hi Mark, a new deal with a group of countries the other side of the world. Our GDP is nowhere safe with our current balance sheet. Looking at other countries' condition doesn't make our deal more satisfactory. It's just a smokescreen." How about this from Alex? COVID-19 doubled our national debt. Let's take that into consideration when discussing the state of the economy. And Jim says, hi, Mark, a very correct decision being sullied by socialist conservatives. The EU is undergoing severe problems which will worsen in the next years. Energy is our problem. We must drop the purely political net zero and climate hoax, says Jim. Listen, Jim, a lot of majority, perhaps, of climate scientists believe that it is a real concern, climate change. But of course, you're entitled to your opinion. That's what this show is all about. Keep them coming. Mark at gbnews.com. It's time now for the big story. And the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has written to the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, about his plans to scrap North Sea oil and gas licences should he enter number 10. Arguing this will risk jobs and future energy supply and energy security, Braverman tells Starmer that Labour are the political wing of Just Stop Oil. Is she right? Let's get the views now of ex-Labour MP and highly in-demand broadcaster and entertainer, Stephen Pound. Hi, Stephen. Listen, it's a powerful line, isn't it? Labour are the political wing of Just Stop Oil. Will it stick?
Well, I have to say, I don't know whether this is just farcical or absolutely contemptible. I was getting a bit worried about the by-elections this week until I read this, and I realised that the Tories are now absolutely diving into the gutter. Look, Sean Woodward and I were in Northern Ireland. I worked for him in Northern Ireland. If either of us had used House of Commons notepaper in our positions at the time to make any sort of a political statement like this, we would have lost our jobs. Look, the situation with Braverman, the most unsuccessful, the most failure-prone Home Secretary since Suella Braverman resigned last year, who's lost control of the police, lost control of immigration, lost control of the Home Office, lost control of knife crime, lost control of the streets. She is now taken a totally unsourced story with no evidence whatsoever, nominally based on an internal memo between two bunches of narcissistic loonies who claim to be talking to somebody from the Labour Party. The Daily Mail prints it up with no screenshots, no screen grabs, no information, no data whatsoever. And I have to say, Suella Braverman, I honestly hoped and thought and prayed that she was better than this. This is contemptible, utter nonsense. We all know what Keir Starmer thinks about Just Stop Oil. They think they're pretty much the same as the rest of us. They're a bunch of narcissistic egomaniacs. And as for North Sea oil, what we're talking about here is actually transitioning from the current industrial situation, the people in the North Sea, to new jobs. Slowly, over time, by 2030, and let's never get the situation we had before, where the pits were closed down and the miners were shut out, and to this day, those coalfield communities are suffering. Keir Starmer is being sensible, pragmatic, articulate and forward-thinking. Suella Braverman is diving into the gutter, and she brings politics into disrepute.
You're really going to have to get off that fence, Stephen Pound. I mean, listen, you say all of that, but Starmer has been supported by a very, very key supporter of Just Stop Oil, the businessman Dale Vince, has given £1.5 million to the Labour Party over the last few years. He backs Just Stop Oil, and he does want to tear up those oil and gas licences in the North Sea, which even the unions who support Labour are furious about.
Well, hang on a second. Firstly, he also sponsors Forest Green Rovers. He doesn't stop people supporting the football team. You can't have guilt by association. The Conservative Party have taken 5 times that amount of money from oil and big gas industries in the last 3 or 4 years, the last 2 years to be precise. So it doesn't actually buy influence overtly. The Labour Party is not in anybody's pocket. We're not going to do what Dale Vince tells us to do. It's absolutely ludicrous suggestion. But in all honesty, you really think for a minute that the most unpopular group of people in this country, which are probably those narcissists wandering up and down the A40, blocking the traffic, are going to get the support of someone like Keir Starmer? Do you honestly think we'd hitch our horses to that wagon? We'd be mad to do it. And I think Suella Braverman does herself no favours whatsoever by trying to make us guilty by association.
Stephen, whenever you're on the show, my assessment is that you are a man of sound judgment. I'm not so sure about Keir Starmer, right? I wish you were the leader of the Labour Party, because this is a guy who's going to invest taxpayer billions in flaky renewables. We've got Germany as a case study. They ended their nuclear industry in 2011, and they've spent a decade investing hundreds of billions in green renewables. What was the end result? They were reliant on Vladimir Putin's oil and gas. It didn't work.
I know. No, let's don't forget, the Germans went for a thing called Nord Sea 2, the idea of a direct link from Russia to Germany. We never, ever went down that road. And we are not anti-nuclear by any stretch of the imagination. What we are anti is the Chinese building our nuclear power stations and having control over the levers of those power stations, as the Conservatives are doing. But more importantly, why on earth should wind turbines be made in South Korea and Sweden? When we're talking about green industries, we're talking about proper industry, real metal-bashing industry that you and I know about. We should be building these wind turbines in this country. They should be built on Teesside, they should be in Southampton, they should be built in South Wales. And that's what we're talking about, investing in green industries. It makes so much sense. I'm sick and fed up of having all our energy owned by the Germans and by the French. And if you want to query your bill now, you've got to speak French or German. Barking bonkers. As far as I'm concerned, we should have our own energy sources, our own energy supply in this country, and we should be building those wind turbines we all need for the future. Sorry about the rant. I'd have to have balls of steel to defend that one, mate, I tell you.
Nicely done. Thank you for name-checking my back catalogue of TV hits. Stephen Pound will catch up soon. Ex-Labour MP, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you back Keir Starmer's plan to invest in renewables should he become Prime Minister? I think it's a massive punt. I think it's a huge gamble. I think it has failed for Germany. And I think we've got to keep a bit of fossil fuel on the back burner. I would not be tearing up those oil and gas licenses. Yes, invest in green, but keep fossil fuel going until monsters like Putin have been dealt with. Coming up next, my pundits tackling the big stories of the day. But first, the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you were able to enjoy your weekend. It has been a rather blustery one for many of us, but as we come to the end of Sunday, low pressure is pushing its way off towards Scandinavia, allowing those isobars to widen out, and the winds will be easing throughout this evening and overnight. Still, though, some showers lingering primarily across western areas of England and Wales, but more persistently across areas of Scotland, some longer spells in there at times as well. Elsewhere, we will see some clear intervals developing, and in those clear intervals, temperatures dropping down to around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, so a touch fresher compared to some recent nights. Where you have those clear intervals, though, it means that you'll see some sunshine first thing to start off the new working week. A cloudy affair for Scotland, but all of us will eventually see some showers developing as we head throughout the day. Again, they could be heavy in places, particularly through central eastern areas of England. Some thunderstorms and hail is also possible. But with the winds turning lighter compared to the weekend, where you see those sunny intervals in between the showers, it will just feel that bit warmer as well, highs around 20-23 degrees Celsius. Into Tuesday, our focus then turns to this low pressure centre that's going to start pushing its way in from the west. So quite a damp start to Tuesday for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then push its way into northern Wales, northern England, parts of southern Scotland as well. Far north of Scotland, seeing sunshine and showers. The far south east of England also as well, staying relatively dry throughout. But as we head towards the end of the week, sunshine and showers returns once again. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up next with the pundits, as Sir Keir Starmer refuses to say whether a Labour government would spend more on public services, is he being shifty, or does this prove that Labour are serious about power? Also, are restaurants that publish calorie counts on their menus killjoys? We'll discuss all of that in 2 minutes.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
An email's come in from Wendy. Good evening, Mark. Never voted for Labour and never will, but Stephen Pound really is exceptional. No-nonsense political force. All political parties should take note. Great show, by the way. Well, Wendy, thank you so much. Do you know what I like? I like ex-politicians because they can be honest, right? They're not on message. They can be funny and they can tell you what they really think, which is what my three pundits are going to do tonight. Sean Woodward, former Labour MP and Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Edwina Currie, ex-Tory MP and Junior Health Minister, and Simon Danchuk, former Labour MP for Rochdale. Now, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says he cannot promise big increases in public spending if the party win the next election. Pressed for his plans on TV this morning, Starmer declined to say what kind of pay increases Labour would offer public sector workers, preferring to focus his plans on growth whilst promising responsible economics. So does Starmer's unwillingness to spend his way into Downing Street show that Labour are serious about power, or is he just being shifty? Edwina.
You do realise, Mark, don't you? You've got on this sofa, you've got two former Labour MPs, two former Tory MPs and two former health ministers.
This is
That's
like
amazing.
a quiz.
Yeah.
Which one is it?
It's also a bit like a maths A-level question.
Yes.
How do you get 5 ministers into 3 people?
Well, there you go. And Sean's been all 3 of them.
Yeah, by the way, can I just say, how do you get 5 ministers into 3 people is a sentence that could be badly misconstrued. And it's a family show, so we'll move on.
What was your question?
That's a movie I'd pay to see. Edwina, do you think, is this a sign that Starmer's getting serious about power, or is he just being shifty? He won't be led on what kind of pay rises the public sector will get.
Well, unfortunately, it means that both the main parties sound a bit too much like each other, I'm afraid. I mean, it's actually hard to cut public spending when everybody has got used to it during COVID. Yeah. And getting us all used to actually taking responsibility for our lives, changing our behaviour to cope with inflation and so on, that is actually quite an ask. What Starmer is doing is being told by a woman what to do. I'm waiting for Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, to actually start talking about household budgets and handbags. At some point, then, we will know that the Labour Party is serious about taking office. He's being told he cannot make big spending plans or they're not going to be credible when they come to a general election. And in fact, she's right about that. Rachel Reeves would make a much better Labour Party leader, I think, than Keir Starmer, but the Labour Party still uselessly has not got its head around the idea that women can be leaders?
I'm not sure. Well, there's some truth to that. I'm not sure about Rachel Reeves as a leader. She's very dour. I mean, she puts, she makes Gordon Brown look exciting. What a damning verdict. You talk about credibility, and that's a problem Starmer's got. He has a credibility problem because he got himself elected as leader, appealing to the far left, and that got him elected. And now he's trying to transition to the centre ground of politics, and so he's flip-flopping on a whole range of issues. It was not long ago they were both promising, Reeves and Starmer, to borrow £28 billion a year to invest in a green plan, and now they're trying to row back from that. So we don't really know what he stands for, and that's an issue that's going to come out more and more as we get closer to a general election.
Yeah, well, what do you think about his performance on TV this morning, not being led on what kind of pay rises the public sector would accrue?
Look, the best way to judge Keir Starmer's performance, with huge respect to my two friends here...
Oh, here comes an insult now. Strap yourselves in.
What we might personally think. It's actually what the voters think. And what is quite clear out there is that the Labour Party, with Keir Starmer as leader, has a stonking great lead over the government at the moment.
Appeal for Starmer.
No, but we are...
Have you ever met a Keir Starmer fan?
Let's be honest about this. We're all old enough to remember previous elections, and we remember Neil Kinnock's leader of the Labour Party. He never had this kind of lead. This is a very significant lead. We're looking at the kind of numbers that Tony Blair had in the years in which Edwina was a minister. And what I think we've got to see here is that the public, it's not about what we think, it's what the public thinks. And the public has had enough of this government. And I think what Keir Starmer is showing when he says, I'm not going to discuss pay increases, I'm not the government, is the same discipline that Blair and Brown showed. And if they continue with this discipline, then what we will see is they will be elected because the discipline matters. It's the same discipline that Mrs Thatcher showed as she ran up towards the election in 1979. And it's the right thing to do. And actually what it shows is you are serious about being in government, because it's only when you are in government and you have got the Treasury and all those civil servants with you that you actually know what you really can do.
Does it set Labour up for an almighty civil war should they get into power? Because I think we can all agree that if they do get in, it'll be a slender majority.
I think that's wishful thinking.
Well,
I think
they won't get a landslide,
I think by our opponents it's wishful thinking. What I think is extraordinary is that this is a party that had Jeremy Corbyn as leader just a few years ago.
Championed by Starmer.
This is a party now...
Starmer was his best mate, apparently.
Magnificently defeated, and I say that with huge irony in 2019, now looks like it is set, nothing taken for granted.
You haven't answered my Civil War question, Simon.
Well, 2 points. I think if the Conservative MPs were only slightly more disciplined, then Labour would not be in the frame in terms of the general election. That's a key point.
That's right. And discipline is part of approaching a general election, or a general election year, as I think next year will be. And what Starmer and I think Rachel Reeves are doing is rubbing out the little bit that can give the opposition to them something to work on. If they're behaving themselves, it's much harder to attack them and to suggest that they will be irresponsible if they're in government. The irresponsibility almost feels the other way around. I hate to say it, and I hope none of my Tory friends are listening to this, but we've had 3 Prime Ministers in a year, 5 Secretaries of State for Education, umpteen Ministers of Health. We're about to have a new Secretary of State for Defence while we're in the middle of a European war. Something on that feels quite fragile. That's not how you want to be as you're going into general election. You want to look confident. You want to look on top of things. If you don't look on top of things, if you don't look in charge, how are you going to persuade anybody to vote for you?
In terms of a Labour government, there will be concern. You've already got today, you've got Sharon Graham, leader of Unite Trade Union, coming out. They're the biggest backer of Labour, saying we want nationalisation of energy and steel. You've got Mick Lynch, leader of RMT, saying it needs to be a socialist government, not a Labour government. There's going to be one heck of a fight.
I agree with you, Simon, and the issue that Labour will have is if it's a slender majority, 5, 10, 15 seats, that puts the Corbynites in the driving seat. Keir Starmer will have to negotiate with John McDonnell and Richard Bergen. Good luck with that. What do you think, Mark at GBnews.com? My brilliant pundits are back in just a few minutes, but coming up next, my Mark Meets guest is former Trade and Defence Secretary Dr. Liam Fox, one of the founding fathers of Brexit. He's live in the studio. See you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm just whispering to my Mark Meets guest. Listen, the results are in from an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight poll. We've been asking, as Sir Keir Starmer refuses to say whether a Labour government would spend more money on public services, does this prove they can be trusted with the economy? Does it prove they're serious about power? Oh dear, not a good result for Starmer. 18.2% say yes, it does. 81.8% are not convinced. It's time now for this. It's time now for Mark Meets, and this evening, one of the most experienced and respected politicians in the country and one of the founding fathers of Brexit, Dr. Liam Fox, the Conservative Member of Parliament for North Somerset and former Secretary of State for International Trade and Secretary of State for Defence. Liam Fox studied medicine at the University of Glasgow and worked as a GP and civilian army doctor before entering Parliament in 1992, and the rest is history. Dr. Liam Fox, welcome to the studio.
Thanks very much.
Great to have you here. First of all, congratulations are in order. CPTPP, which is a fantastic trade bloc that we're part of, which I think amounts to about £12 trillion worth of potential trade. Biggest trading bloc in the world now, bigger than the EU. You began negotiations for this deal in 2018.
Well, it's great to see it signed by Kemi today. The potential is because it's the fastest growing bloc in the world. The potential is what it offers to us in the future rather than the snapshot of where it is today. Although, as Kemi Badenoch said this morning,
This is an empowering agreement. It takes British businesses to want to use it for us to maximise the benefit in terms of exports, although there's also the benefit in terms of investment. CPTPP countries already employ in Britain around 400,000 people. This makes the investments in Britain easier, so it's likely to attract yet further investment to Britain. And remember that in terms of value of investments and in terms of jobs created by overseas investments into Britain, we are the top country in Europe.
No, it's fantastic news, and we still have tariff-free trade with the EU. People forget that. They think because of Brexit we somehow don't trade with the EU or we've got massive costs or whatever. You know, we know that there are issues, but in the end we're now trading with the world. That was the promise of Brexit. What do you say to those who sort of bandy this figure around that Brexit is going to cost the British economy 4% and that the benefits of this new deal that you began negotiations for will give us about 0.08%?
I take all of this with a big pinch of salt because I remember what we were told before the referendum. I remember George Osborne as Chancellor saying it would cost 500,000 jobs, the CBI saying it would cost 1 million, the Lib Dems 3 million jobs. We actually have reduced our unemployment rate from 4.7 to 3.9% since we left the European Union, and we've added 1 million jobs to our economy. In terms of growth, France has grown 8.8%, Britain 8.7%, Germany 8.1%. Italy 6.1%, so clearly it's not having an effect on our growth the way that was predicted. And by July 2022, not only were our exports to the European Union the highest since Brexit, they were the highest ever.
Yes, it's amazing. The exports to the EU are up and exports to the rest of the world are up. It is working, and that's in the backdrop of a global pandemic, an energy price crisis as a result of the war in Ukraine and other factors. Overall, though, notwithstanding that, how do you feel Brexit is going? Because many of your colleagues on the back benches are not happy that Brexit has been fulfilled. They're not happy about Northern Ireland, and they're not happy about a lot of EU rules and regulations still in place.
Well, that's a very legitimate worry to have because, as I was mentioning, those countries, France, Germany, Italy, in terms of their growth rate, if you look at the United States at the same time, it's 14.4%, considerably more than any European country, which suggests to me that the European economies are not as competitive as they ought to be. We should now be looking to see which parts of those regulatory inheritances that we had from Europe we can jettison to make ourselves as competitive an economy as the United States.
Are you disappointed? Do you feel that the Brexit potential has not been tapped into? I mean, yes, we're out. No free movement, control of our borders policy, control of our cash, no more ever closer union, no payments of £2 billion a month.
That sounds a pretty good list.
Right, it's not a bad list, is it? But many people, I've got viewers and listeners who just think it's still not a real Brexit. They don't feel life has changed.
Well, life has changed immediately. I was someone who wanted to leave for constitutional reasons. I believe that in the United Kingdom, we should choose who makes our laws. So therefore, for me, Brexit was achieved the minute we left. And I think for many people that was the case. But you also have to remember, just as we got Brexit over the line, we were hit by the pandemic. And that's had a big impact on global trade, apart from anything else, not least in supply chains and so on. And it will take a little while for that to unravel. Meanwhile, we should be looking to see where we can find the opportunities in the world's growing markets, not just, as I said, for exports, but also for investment from those, because they will generate jobs in Britain. And ultimately, the measure of Brexit will be, in the longer term, will be, did the government of the day, of whatever party, use the freedoms that Brexit gave them to maximise the prosperity of the British people?
What are the percentage chances that in the next 10 years Brexit will play out very badly and there will be pressure for us to rejoin? Do you see that happening?
No, I don't think the British people are ever going to buy into a European project that is based on ever closer union, that will increasingly take our sovereignty away from us. It would require us to join Schengen, so there would be completely free movement.
And
so
we'd have to take the euro.
And we would have to join the euro, but it would mean that people who got into the southern border of Greece, for example, would legitimately be able to come to the United Kingdom.
What would you say to those businesses who are struggling, though? They've given up exporting, some of them. They've got extra costs. They can't get hold of certain materials as quickly as they used to. The people who are Democrats, they accept the result, but are suffering as a result of Brexit. What would you say to them?
Well, some businesses who have traded exclusively with Europe will have some of those frictions. But that's not the majority of our companies. Very few British companies only export to the European Union. Most will export to worldwide, including the European Union, or they'll be exporting services which don't fall under goods. So my advice would be to try to look for other markets. And try to encourage...
Would that not enrage them? Could that not be quite insulting?
Well, it's not insulting. It's to say if you're having trouble, try and find other markets that you can also use. And we should still be working with the European Union to try to iron out any of the wrinkles, because it works in both directions. Free trade is a win-win. And to maintain restrictions between us doesn't actually suit either party.
Now, you've had a very long and distinguished career in politics, and you've been a cabinet minister, and you are one of the chief architects of Brexit as well, and this amazing trade deal today, CPTPP, and many other things. You were really the flag bearer for Britain as a sort of global economic force when you were in the cabinet. And you've actually had a couple of tilts at becoming leader of the Conservative Party. You've got lots of fans out there. Any regrets that you didn't get the top job?
Well, I suppose you always regret if you go for something and don't get it, and you think of how you could have shaped things. But, you know, you take politics, you take the rough with the smooth. And I've been very lucky. I was a minister in John Major's government, I was a minister in David Cameron's government, I was a minister in Theresa May's government. And I think one of the advantages of that is it gives you a long perspective. It gives you also a collective memory that I think is missing too much in politics today. People who come into Parliament for a short time and then leave without getting a long-term view of how our political system works.
I know you're supportive of Rishi Sunak, you're a loyal party man, but if you were Prime Minister, what would you be doing differently to what Sunak currently is?
Well, I think he is doing a great job, and I think he has really steadied the ship. I think he's understood that given the amount of debt that Britain has, we've got to keep confidence in the markets. That was the main, I think, difference that he had. I think he understands that we've got to set out our policies, explaining them rationally to the voters. And I think he's got to also point out the danger of the Labour Party, because Keir Starmer's been talked a lot about today. And here's a man who only in 2019 told us that Jeremy Corbyn was a perfectly acceptable Prime Minister, a Labour Party that was riddled with anti-Semitism, that was anti-NATO and a unilateral disarming leader in Jeremy Corbyn. So, excuse me if I don't place much faith in Keir Starmer.
Briefly, it's so great to have you in the studio. You must come back again soon, because I love ex-cabinet ministers, because they can be honest and say what they really think. What's next for you? What would you like to do? Would you consider a return to frontline politics?
Well, I want to help the Conservatives to win the next election. I leave it to the Prime Minister to decide what role he thinks that might be best.
Ever the diplomat. Liam Fox, great to have you in your studio. Catch up with you very soon. Coming up, we've got a very busy hour. Anne Widdecombe will be talking about whether Prince George should enter the military before becoming king. And also, Sadiq Khan is giving free school meals to London kids. Is it the government's job to feed our children? But next up, I'll be dealing with Hugh Edwards. Many people want us to move on. Well, I'm not moving on. It's not going to happen. There are so many questions that remain unanswered. I'll be focusing on Hugh Edwards after this. See you in 2.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you were able to enjoy your weekend. It has been a rather blustery one for many of us, but as we come to the end of Sunday, low pressure is pushing its way off towards Scandinavia, allowing those isobars to widen out, and the winds will be easing throughout this evening and overnight. Still, though, some showers lingering primarily across western areas of England and Wales, but more persistently across areas of Scotland, some longer spells in there at times as well. Elsewhere, we will see some clear intervals developing, and in those clear intervals, temperatures dropping down to around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, so a touch fresher compared to some recent nights. Where you have those clear intervals, though, it means that you'll see some sunshine first thing to start off the new working week. A cloudy affair for Scotland, but all of us will eventually see some showers developing as we head throughout the day. Again, they could be heavy in places, particularly through central eastern areas of England. Some thunderstorms and hail is also possible. But with the winds turning lighter compared to the weekend, where you see those sunny intervals in between the showers, it will just feel that bit warmer as well, highs around 20-23 degrees Celsius. It's a Tuesday. Our focus then turns to this low pressure centre that's going to start pushing its way in from the west. So quite a damp start to Tuesday for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then push its way into northern Wales, northern England, lots of southern Scotland as well. Far north of Scotland, seeing sunshine and showers. The far south east of England also as well, staying relatively dry throughout. But as we head towards the end of the week, sunshine and showers returns once again. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan tonight. It might take a 10 as the BBC's sex scandal rumbles on. Hugh Edwards is not the victim here. Let me tell you, this story is not going away, not on my watch. I'll be asking some tough questions that remain unanswered in just a couple of minutes. Also, should Prince George serve in the military before becoming king? And as London Mayor Sadiq Khan announces free school meals for every primary school pupil, is it the state's job to feed our children? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe. And Mark Dolan tonight is the home of the papers, with tomorrow's front pages from exactly 10:30 sharp, with full pundit reaction. Tonight, Simon Danchuk, Edwina Curry and Sean Woodward. The media elite think the Hugh Edwards story is quietly going away. Not on my watch. I'll be dealing with Hugh Edwards in 2 minutes' time after the headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Spain's Carlos Alcaraz has won Wimbledon for the first time, ending Novak Djokovic's recent dominance on centre court. Alcaraz, the world number one, came from a set down to eventually edge a 5-set classic. It was the second longest Wimbledon final. It prevented Djokovic from equalling a number of records. He was chasing an 8th men's title at the All England Club and his 5th in a row, plus a 24th Grand Slam win overall. The Serb's last defeat on centre court came against Andy Murray in 2013. Europe's bracing for a severe heat storm this week, with predictions of record temperatures on the continent. Wildfires continue to burn out of control on the Spanish island of La Palma in the Canaries. At least 4,000 people have been evacuated as a result. British holidaymakers travelling to southern Europe are being advised to take precautions, with temperatures predicted to climb as high as 49 degrees. South Korea has also been hit by extreme weather, with rescue teams continuing to retrieve victims trapped in a flooded tunnel. It's unclear how many people remain missing. There have been at least 37 deaths as a result of landslides and floods caused by heavy rain. Scientists believe heat waves and flooding are becoming more frequent and more intense because of climate change. A pod of more than 50 pilot whales have died after a mass stranding on a Scottish beach. They were washed up at North Tulsta on the Isle of Lewis around 7 a.m. this morning. Marine rescuers believe only 15 initially survived, but efforts to refloat a number of them failed. The cause of the stranding is unknown. It is thought the highly social mammals may have followed in a weak or sick member of the pod. The government's hailing the UK joining an Indo-Pacific trading bloc, but critics say the economic benefits will be minimal. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch says the deal will bring British companies a step closer to a market of 500 million people, opening up access to £12 trillion worth of global trade. However, officials estimate it will add just £1.8 billion a year to the economy, representing less than 1% of UK GDP. And the last ship to set sail from Ukraine under the Black Sea grain deal has left the port of Odessa a day before the agreement expires. It allows Ukraine to safely export grain and fertiliser while the war against Russia continues. It's also eased fears of global food shortages while stabilising prices. Russia, though, says it won't renew the deal until Western sanctions on its own exports are lifted, a threat Russia has made before. However, President Erdogan of Turkey, who brokered the original agreement with the United Nations, says he's confident it will be extended. That is it for the moment. We'll be back in about an hour's time. Now it's over to Mark.
My thanks to Aaron Armstrong, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Busy hour to come. Should Prince George serve in the military before becoming king? And as London Mayor Sadiq Khan announces free school meals for every primary school pupil in the capital, is it the state's job to feed our children? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe. And Mark Dolan tonight is the home of the papers, with tomorrow's front pages from exactly 10:30 sharp. Plus, my brilliant pundits will be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros. Tonight, my pundits are Simon Danchuk, Sean Woodward and Edwina Curry. Big stories, big guests and always big opinions. Let's start with my take at 10. It's been reported that BBC boss Tim Davie finds his staff's coverage of the Hugh Edwards sex allegations bizarre. According to the Sunday Times, Mr Davie has concern over how BBC staff are covering the situation and plans to talk to the BBC News Department about this. Does he indeed? Is he going to tell them off for doing journalism? His friends allege that Mr Davie would rather it wasn't dealt with like this. Would he not? This is the leader of an organisation that sat on its hands for 7 weeks following shocking allegations that their biggest star and the face of their news operation had allegedly paid a crack cocaine-addicted teenager £35,000 for pornographic images. Nothing to see here. Move on. It's becoming increasingly clear that Hugh Edwards' high-profile cheerleaders want this to go away, with attacks on The Sun for merely reporting the testimony of worried parents. I'm sorry, I'm one of those people that if you say that I can't talk about something, that's the thing I'm going to talk about. If you say, look away, nothing to see here, that's the first place I will look. Which is why I won't move on from the Hugh Edwards scandal, which is, of course, the great wish of the powerful figures in the media elite, who are clearly worried about such an establishment figure falling. They are circling the wagons to protect their own. In life, if something doesn't make sense, then it doesn't make sense. If it doesn't feel right, then it isn't right. But we now live in a topsy-turvy world where saying what you see and pointing out what is perfectly obvious to everyone is a borderline criminal offence. Well, allow me to commit a few crimes then, by asking simple questions. Why has Hugh Edwards made no denial? Yes, he's being treated for mental health issues, and we wish him well. But has he lost the power of speech? If he can't speak, could his family not do it on his behalf, given that they took the decision to name him in the first place, I assume with his consent? Why have his family employed the services of ex-con and surely Britain's most discredited journalist, Andy Coulson? This is a guy that was jailed for hacking the phones of public figures, including murdered schoolgirl Millie Dowler. The Guardian report that Edwards and his family have turned to this former jailbird for advice on crisis management. Surely not the best look, given his team of supporters want to characterise Edwards as the poor, tragic victim. Hugh Edwards is not the victim here. Until these allegations are denied and proved to be untrue, the status of victimhood exists only for the young person whose drug habit allegedly Edwards bankrolled with licence fee cash. Another victim is the youngster that he allegedly met online who, threatening to expose Edwards, was apparently sent expletive-filled messages verified by the BBC as having come from the star's phone. What about the Beeb employee who alleges that they were sent a private message about their appearance which left them with a cold shudder? Why was the brilliant Victoria Derbyshire and the BBC Newsnight team investigating allegations around Hugh Edwards before the original story broke? Derbyshire said on Wednesday's show that present and former corporation staff had been sent inappropriate messages by the newsreader and that junior staff felt totally intimidated by him. Also, was £35,000 really the cost of those images? That's a lot of money for pictures of someone in the nude, given the fact that most pornography is free. Was that 35 grand hush money? Was it a gagging order or a so-called NDA? I would love answers to these questions. And who is paying the expensive legal fees of this alleged crack cocaine-addicted victim, who has, I should add, denied the story? Do alleged crack cocaine addicts have thousands of pounds spare for central London barristers? I know I don't, and I doubt you do either. The issue that no law has been broken is a red herring so fat and juicy it would have seafood chef Rick Stein salivating. Are you telling me that the man who fronted the Queen's funeral and the King's coronation, allegedly betraying his wife and 5 kids whilst parading as a devout Christian, isn't a story? Are you telling me that's not in the national interest? Hugh Edwards could be entirely innocent of all of these charges. All of these testimonies could be a witch hunt and a pack of lies, at which point he's back on the telly, no problem. But at the moment, something doesn't feel right. There are more elephants in the room than London Zoo. And to those who want to shut down the story, I say, tusk, tusk. More questions than answers right now. What's your view? Mark at gbnews.com. Let's get reaction from my top pundits. Sean Woodward, former Labour MP and Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Edwina Currie, ex-Tory MP and Junior Health Minister, and Simon Danczuk, former Labour MP for Rochdale. Simon, I don't think we should move on from this story. I think it's in the national interest that we get answers.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's the hypocrisy that bothers me. Politicians and people in the media coming out and being supportive of Edwards is quite ironic, I think. When I had found myself in a vaguely similar situation back in 2016, didn't involve young men, I might add, the lovies and the lefties went for me. I was hung, drawn and quartered in the media, and I'd done nothing compared to what Edwards appears to have done. So there does seem to be some double standards, and it's the hypocrisy that concerns me most.
Sean Woodward, is it time to move on from this story?
No, I don't think it's time to move on from the story, but I'm really sorry. I disagree with you pretty profoundly, Mark, because I don't think that the idea that no law having been broken is a red herring. I think it's very relevant here. I think, first of all, the fact that the police have now said that there's no evidence that would warrant a criminal investigation. Secondly, that the former editor of The Sun himself described, David Yelland, The Sun inflicted terror on Hugh Edwards despite no evidence of a criminal offence.
What was this
I have
terror?
to say, I don't think
what was this terror of which
and
you
any
speak?
organisation has the right to
terror?
inflict terror on anyone. And we've got to be very careful tonight that we don't add to the terror.
Sean.
Yes, there are issues to look at here, but I think we should all be really careful. On the one hand, saying Hugh Edwards is now in a hospital and we wish him well, but on the other hand, let's inflict a bit more terror.
No,
we need some
terror.
sensitivity to this.
No, I think that, I mean, I don't know where this terror comes from. The Sun newspaper reported allegations from two concerned parents. I don't think this has been cooked up by The Sun. And let's not forget, Sean, that the BBC themselves have been reporting this story with equal vigour.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is The Sun launched all this stuff. The inference that everybody drew was that a criminal offence had been taken.
No, there's some... Why are you going into bat for this guy? There's some evidence that the BBC were looking into this before the Sun allegations appeared.
Well, again, one of the things here, Mark, is the BBC has produced no evidence. Victoria, Derbyshire and Newsnight have not produced anyone. What's extraordinary about this, and I think it's really very concerning, is that there has been no evidence. There are no bank statements, there are no photographs, there is no proof of anything. What there is the suggestion that Hugh Edwards is a despicable person and that he should somehow now completely disappear from life. And we should, on the one hand, say, oh, we're terribly sorry that he's got a mental illness problem. We're very sorry that the poor guy is depressed. But at the same time, let's attack him some more.
No,
there's no evidence here, Mark. And
Edwina.
I think we genuinely have got to stop trying to be a court when we have no material at all. If there is an investigation to be done, let it be done. But what is the urgency that we have to pontificate and now lampoon this guy and his family? And we're not helping, by the way, any of the potential victims by prejudging this with absolutely no evidence whatsoever. Or maybe you do have evidence, in which case, put it before us now.
In the end, I don't think this is an attack, Edwina. We have questions. This is a guy that's paid for by the taxpayer through the licence fee. He was the face of BBC News. The Beeb are investigating this. The Sun are investigating this. He hasn't denied anything. Why has there been no denial, Edwina?
You'd have to ask him why there's no denial. Presumably because he's in hospital and he's being treated and so on. But
couldn't his family deny on his behalf?
You've asked me a question. Let me answer it, darling Mark, in my own way. Because the BBC does have a very big issue here. And the issue is the private life of their well-known figures private or not? I mean, are we expecting the people who are on presenters and so on to behave better than everybody else? If they go onto a dating website or something like that, is that wrong? Are we concerned about it and so on? Now, what the problem is for the BBC is that if they say your private life is private, you can do what you like, then they are giving a green light to people like Gary Lineker to talk about politics on a sports show. They're giving a green light to Carol Vorderman to keep tweeting nasty stuff about the Tories when she's still on BBC Radio Wales. And somewhere along the line, what then gets missed is any kind of balance or, good behaviour in the presenters. From my point of view, If you're really worried about what a TV presenter is like in his private life, you've got a problem. He hasn't got the problem, or she hasn't got the problem, you've got the problem. They are simply, unlike you, Mark, they're simply reading the autocue. They often don't even write it. And we have attached far too much significance to such individuals. I'm perfectly happy if they have a private life. You want to go on a dating website and look for young boys or young girls, and you are a 17, 18, 19-year-old, and you go on a dating website and you're looking for older men? None of my business. It's none of my business.
I do think there are questions to answer, Sean, though, and I think Hugh Edwards is hoping, he's gone silent, he's hoping that he doesn't have to explain what the £35,000 was about. That's a significant question. This guy is paid by the licence fee.
Over £400,000.
A lot of money, so there are questions, Sean.
Forgive me, you've just repeated it. Where's the evidence, by the way, because I haven't seen it, of £35,000? Have you?
No.
No, right, OK. First point. Secondly, was it all paid in one go? Have you got proof of that?
Explain
no, but why? Sorry, but in other words, I could sling out that you got £100,000 from some person 3 years ago. Prove to me that you didn't.
No, it isn't the same.
No, it isn't. It isn't. You can't simply invent an allegation and then expect somebody to say no, deny it.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Folks, I want to debate this more, but the clock's against us. We're going to return to this with the papers at 10:30. Sean, I've stopped you in your flow, but we will come back to this. Next up, I'll be asking Anne Widdecombe, should Prince George serve in the military before becoming king? And is it the government's job to feed the country's children? We'll discuss that next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Is it the government's job to feed the nation's children? We'll discuss that with Anne Widdecombe next. Now, folks, listen, we'll get to that shortly. It is time now for the Newsmaker, in which we speak to a fearless commentator on the big stories of the day. Tonight, the Mail on Sunday report Prince George will not be expected to serve in the military before becoming king, breaking centuries of tradition. It would be a significant departure for the royal family, as the monarch is Commander-in-Chief of Britain's armed forces. George's father, uncle, grandfather, great-grandmother and great-grandfather all served with the military, sticking to a centuries-old precedent. So have the royals dropped the ball on this one? Let's ask tonight's Newsmaker, the aforementioned TV personality, former government minister and best-selling author Anne Widdecombe. Anne, do you accept this break with tradition?
No, I don't. I think it's a very, very big mistake, and I wonder just how far they've thought this through, and if Prince William has discussed this thoroughly with the King. Because the idea of the royals being in the military isn't just because it's a centuries-old tradition and it's all pomp and ceremony. Not at all. They are the head of the military. They're the head of the armed services. If Britain goes to war, it is the King, acting on the advice of the government, who sends them to war. Now, if they've asking men to go out and fight and die, and they themselves have never so much as served in a peacetime military fashion, then inevitably they won't have the same degree of respect and loyalty. I mean, when you hear the troops cheering the King, they're not just cheering the crown and the flag, they're cheering one of their own. And about the only good thing you can say about this miserable, whining Prince Harry is about the Invictus Games. And why did he set that up? Because he'd been in the services. He'd actually been in action, not just in the services. He'd been in action. That is what the troops have a right to expect of the monarch. And if this is a serious decision, rather than just tittle-tattle coming out of the palace, if this is a serious decision, it is the wrong one.
Indeed so. I do agree with you. After all, our soldiers in the armed forces fight for king and country. Is there any sense, Anne, in which this reflects how the wider establishment are beginning to underestimate the importance of our armed forces?
Yes, well, I mean, they've been doing that for a long time, in as much as the armed services have been run down. The reserve has also been run down. You know, the equipment is not up to scratch always. You know, the defence budget's been cut and cut and cut. So I think that successive governments of both parties have undermined the armed services. And this would just be a further blow. When they're cheering the King, they're cheering one of their own. And I, strongly urge His Majesty to consider that and to have a serious conversation with his son.
And a quick one on London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who is to provide free meals for all primary school pupils in London from September. Of course, we don't want little ones going hungry. That's a tragedy. But is it the government's job to feed our children?
I know it is not the government's job to feed children. But the awful thing about this proposal is this is going to be every single primary school child, every single one, including the children of middle-class parents, wealthy parents, parents who can quite easily afford school meals. So there's going to be a huge waste of expenditure where it isn't needed. Now, I'm all for helping the children of the seriously poor and disadvantaged. I'm all for that. I don't have a problem with that. But that should be addressed through the benefit system. And the parent are ultimately responsible, and that is how it should be. I mean, the idea that you feed the children of Labour MPs who send their children to state schools on principle while tutoring them at home, the idea that you feed them, why? Why should we be feeding the children of those who can afford to?
Anne, I wish we had longer. I'll catch you in a week's time. Have a great week. My thanks to former government minister, best-selling author and TV personality Anne Widdecombe, the jewel in the crown of Mark Dolan tonight on a Sunday. I'll get to your emails shortly, plus the papers are coming, but first the weather.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you were able to enjoy your weekend. It has been a rather blustery one for many of us, but as we come to the end of Sunday, low pressure is pushing its way off towards Scandinavia, allowing those ice bars to widen out, and the winds will be easing throughout this evening and overnight. Still, though, some showers lingering primarily across western areas of England and Wales, but more persistently across areas of Scotland, some longer spells in there at times as well. Elsewhere, we will see some clear intervals developing, and in those clear intervals, temperatures dropping down to around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, so a touch fresher compared to some recent nights. Where you have those clear intervals, though, it means that you'll see some sunshine first thing to start off the new working week. A cloudy affair for Scotland, but all of us will eventually see some showers developing as we head throughout the day. Again, they could be heavy in places, particularly through central eastern areas of England. Some thunderstorms and hail is also possible. But with the winds turning lighter compared to the weekend, where you see those sunny intervals in between the showers, it will just feel that bit warmer as well, highs around 20-23 degrees Celsius. Into Tuesday, our focus then turns to this low pressure centre that's going to start pushing its way in from the west. So quite a damp start to Tuesday for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then push its way into northern Wales, northern England, parts of southern Scotland as well. Far north of Scotland, seeing sunshine and showers. The far south east of England also as well, staying relatively dry throughout. But as we head towards the end of the week, sunshine and showers returns once again. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Keir Starmer faces a fierce backlash. About what? Find out in the papers next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Let me tell you that I've really enjoyed your company over the last 12 days. That's right, this has been my residency on GB News. 12 nights you've had to put up with me, listening on the radio, watching on telly, but I've enjoyed every minute. And I'm very excited to tell you that the big man is back tomorrow. Dan Wootton returns at 9 o'clock, and he is raring to go. It's just gone 10:30. It's time for this. Tomorrow's papers hot off the press. We start with the Daily Mail. James, what have you got for us? Here we go. PM vows to curb rip-off degrees. Universities offering rip-off courses will be subject to strict controls to protect students and taxpayers. And all hail tennis's new king, Carlos. The Independent. The new king of centre court, and also in an exclusive from The Independent, now royal family are dragged into N-word race row. Offensive slur used over 40 times in Royal Collection Guide to Jewellery since 2008, and only removed last week after The Independent actually did an investigation into these public documents. Metro. Staycation beach crisis. Raw sewage has been pumped onto dozens of beaches as millions prepare for a UK seaside holiday. How depressing. The I newspaper, Conservative Starmer faces backlash over refusal to scrap child benefits cap. Labour leader faces anger in his party after ruling out a change to the controversial Tory policy. Sir Keir refuses to scrap two-child benefit cap or commit to greater spending on the NHS and public services if he gets into number 10, doubling down on fiscally conservative economic plans. The Guardian, alarm as new heat storm threatens to engulf Europe. And also children waiting years for an ADHD assessment. Daily Star. Boffins now want us to hug a gull. Boffins want people to ditch their hatred of seagulls and make peace with the winged pests because they're not an enemy. Oh, there you go. Well, I've always found them quite terrifying, but that's just me, isn't it? Listen, let's get to my brilliant pundits now for full reaction to the big stories of the day. Sean Woodward, former Labour MP and Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Edwina Currie, ex-Tory MP, star of BBC Radio 5 Live and former junior health minister. And ex-Labour MP, writer and broadcaster, I should say, he's got a book out as well, Simon Danczuk. Yes, Simon, you've written a bit of a thriller, haven't you? What's it called?
Well, Scandal at Dolphin Square, a notorious history. Yeah, so, and it's where I live. And it's
real, it's non-fiction, but it reads like a thriller, I'm told.
Exactly right, yeah. We cover about 100 scandals, and it's just gone to paperback, so it's even cheaper now.
Congratulations, I'm glad I gave it a plug. So, listen, let's get into these stories, and lots to sink our teeth into, Edwina. Can we talk about this story in the Eye? Conservative Starmer faces backlash over refusal to scrap child benefits cap. Very similar to his refusal to say what kind of pay rise the public sector would get. He really is trying to mimic Tony Blair in 1997, isn't he?
Well, he is. And, of course, what happened in 97 was that the promise was made to keep Kenneth Clarke's Tory budgets. And they stuck to that for 2 years. And the outcome of that was, actually, our public debt started going down. And we were doing very nicely indeed, which then gave them the opportunity to start spending money with all the outcomes that we saw later. So it looks as if what is being acknowledged here, Mark, is that actually Conservatives do run the economy much better.
Well, I wonder about that. The issue is how this will go down with the grassroots. They won't be happy, will they, Simon? And, you know, Keir Starmer's not in number 10 just yet.
No, that's right. There will be a lot of lobbying from people on the left of the party who are pressing him to do more and to spend more. But it's taking up the point that you've made, is that in 97 the economy was very buoyant, and so there was money around.
But that's because we'd been in charge for all those years.
But that's not the situation going into this general election, so he's not going to have much money to spend. So it is going to be a real challenge for him should they win the general election.
I'm going to credit him for this, Sean, because this just tells me that he's living in the real world. He knows that the country is broke and he won't spend money we haven't got.
I think you're absolutely right. And I'm going to entirely agree with you with this, which is a bit different from our conversation before with Hugh Edwards. But something I will disagree with Simon about is, you see, I used to represent a constituency in the north of England, St Helens, and it was a very strong Labour constituency, number of mines that had been closed down under the Tory government. So it was absolute heartland Labour territory. And I don't think you will find
a huge number of people in that constituency right now who will say that Keir Starmer is wrong about this. Because, first and foremost, they want a Labour government. Secondly, and with huge respect, these are actually very smart people. They know that the country doesn't have any money. And actually, what I found is that when you talk to these people, when you sit down and you actually say, what do you want to happen? They want a good Britain in which we have strong health services, strong police, good education, but they're not fools. They know that the money has to come from somewhere. And they know there isn't any money at the moment, and they want things to get better, but they want Labour to win. So all I would say is you just understand that when we sit here and say, yeah, but it's going to upset the left, there may be some people like Jeremy Corbyn who don't much like it. But
in fact,
the heartland of the Labour Party, the people who will put Keir into number 10 with a good majority, which is what I think he will get, are people who actually think he's talking sense.
But the seats that were won by Boris in 2019, many of the northern seats, and I'm the president of High Peak Conservative Association, so we are a key marginal seat in the north of England, they're actually more likely, according to all the polls, to stay with the Tories. And actually, one of the reasons is exactly what has just been said, what Sean's been putting his fingers on, that they understand that if the economy is badly run, if there's spending goes completely haywire, and suddenly there's a crackdown and taxes start to have to go up and so on, it's actually some of the poorest in society who then have to pay.
And
they're worried about that. They would much prefer to have a steady balance. They also are worried about a possible future Labour government deciding to row back from Brexit, which can still happen. There's plenty of people in the Labour Party that are anti-Brexit, that are Remainers, that don't care about the way in which the referendum was held. I mean, last time there were political parties going into the election that were saying that they would row back from even a referendum result, that they would go straight into taking us back into Europe. So, you know, bear this in mind. The north of England thought long and hard, as you say, about how they voted, and many of them are going to carry on voting Conservative.
The point I was making is that the people on the left, not the heartland Labour voters, the people on the left are a challenge for Starmer.
The people in the cities, the metropolitan Labour voters?
Well, no, the membership and also his MPs in Parliament. He has a real... He doesn't have control over his party like Blair had control over the
Because
Labour
also
Party.
Blair's parliamentary party was pretty centre-ground, centre-left, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
There are, how sort of left would you say the current parliamentary party is, or will be?
Well, this is the point, because under Corbyn, you had a load of Labour MPs from the far left elected in 2017 and in 2019.
Roughly how many would you say? 20, 30?
20, 30, I would have thought, absolutely.
Some of them are complete headbangers.
Absolutely. And he's going to have to deal with us.
And they could hold the balance of power in a hung parliament.
Exactly. Or if it's a Labour small majority, they will be the Labour MPs who are holding Starmer, you know...
And they'll push his agenda to the left, won't they?
And they'll make challenges.
Isn't that a concern for you, Sean?
Well, look, you take nothing for granted until polling day comes. And, you know, until all those votes are counted, you do not know the answer.
You fancy a big majority, don't you?
I think that the way things are going, and I think that there's a real death wish inside the Conservative Party at the moment.
Yeah, that's true.
It's hard to imagine the circumstances, and not least, of course, what's happening in Scotland as well. We've gone from only one Labour MP there at the moment to very possibly 15, 20, 25, 30 again because of the collapse of the SNP. So there's a lot of things falling in Keir's favour. But every time he has a row with what we describe as the left, and what I experienced in St Helens was the left amongst constituents who vote doesn't really exist. These are hard-working families who do not regard themselves as left or right. They just want decent care services, right?
And don't take for granted...
Every time he has a row with the left, I think you then see his majority go up. Because if he stands up...
But it doesn't feel like 97.
Somebody else
You're very kind to tell me to shush. I won't do that to you.
Nobody messes with Edwina.
Everyone's taking for granted here that actually Labour are going to win. It's at least another year until the general election.
I think I said I don't take anything for granted.
But you talk like you do. And we can look at the economy, we can see things hopefully improving. The legislation's going through on illegal immigration. There's a whole host of other things happening. It could actually pan out that we win it. We might not win it with a majority of 80. Who knows? But
it certainly doesn't feel like 1997. This is not going to be a landslide.
You don't think it's 97 all over again? Can I ask you about this issue, Simon, regarding how much the state can do in our lives? The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has announced that all primary school pupils will receive free lunches, which is great news for deprived kids, but doesn't make sense for middle-class families.
But they get them anyway.
Costs a lot of money.
Deprived kids get free lunches at school
anyway.
anyhow.
Well, let's take a listen to this email, and I'd love to get your response on this, Simon. And it's from John, who says, Mark, a family of 4 on benefits could have a bigger family income than me and my wife, both working, yet our son with autism does not get free school meals. So how is it that if you live in London, Wales and Scotland, every child is entitled to a free school meal right now? Either make it universal in the whole country or just children on benefits. And that is an important point, isn't it? What do you think about the scale of the state? Like I asked Anne Widdecombe, is it the government's job to feed our kids?
Well, I should declare an interest. I was brought up on free school meals because I came from a very poor one-parent family, so they were really important to me, and we were able to claim them because we were living on benefits. So there is a role to be played in terms of the state in that. But when we are so tight for money in the country, I mean, creating universal benefits, I just do not think is the solution. When, you know, making such benefits available to everybody, to wealthy people as well, it has to be more focused. And so Sadiq Khan's got it wrong on this.
Well, we also have, don't we, Simon, a benefits system which is designed so that people would have hopefully enough resources, and we know it's never enough, but to feed their families. Does it cross a line in terms of expectations of what the state can do?
Well, I think that's a really interesting point, and I think we have a too big a state. We were talking about growth earlier. I think that the state needs to be shrunk. Government needs to be smaller than what it is currently. We're spending far too much. We can't afford as a country to be spending the amount of money on, by government or on government. Government needs to take a step back.
Sean, I'll come to you in just a moment. Edwina, you've said on more than one occasion that the government can't do everything.
And we should avoid infantilising the people. We should do everything that we can to support and encourage and help and lift people up. And that includes giving, nutritional advice or whatever. And I think the school meals need to be as good quality as possible. But sooner or later, if people have kids, we want them to be good parents in every way. We want them to encourage the kids to go to school, support the kids at school in every way. So the system that we've had for most of my lifetime is support those who really need it, but encourage everybody else to take responsibility. And that seems to me a basic Tory principle. I like it.
Sean, we want to look after deprived kids, but does this policy in London let parents off the hook their responsibility to feed their kids?
I, very early on in my television career before politics, worked for Esther Ranson on That's Life, and I became involved in the early years as Deputy Chairman of Childline. And what I learned from working with Esther and from Childline was, when it comes to children, if we don't look after our children, we don't have a strong society. So the issue I would start with here is, what is the case actually for providing free school meals? And secondly, to touch on something Edwina picked on, it's not just about providing free school meals, it's what you provide. Because actually, it's not good enough to simply say, well, we've got this great idea, we're going to give people free school meals. It sounds great, but what are you giving them? I mean, my daughter, Ella Mills, Ella Woodward as she would have been, has a brand called Deliciously Ella. And Ella is really interested in the whole area of young people and nutrition and what we feed people.
Yeah.
So, you know, dare I say it, I understand what Sadiq is trying to do here, but I think it's a much bigger issue. And, you know, Edwina did some very interesting work when she was a minister in this area as well. It's not just about saying, even if we can afford it, let's give children free school meals, but what are we giving them? Because actually giving them food which contributes to kids being overweight and obesity is doing nobody any favours at all. On the other hand, the idea that a child goes hungry and goes to bed Hungry is something in a good society that we shouldn't tolerate either.
On that, we all agree. Coming up, I've got front pages of The Telegraph, The Times and The Express, plus my pundits will be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros. Plus, we've been asking on Twitter whether or not restaurants with a calorie count are killjoys. We'll discuss that next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Producers are brilliant.
Well, we've conducted Mark Dolan tonight People's Poll with a simple question. As London Mayor Sadiq Khan announces free school meals for every primary school pupil, is the state's job to feed our children? The results are in. And 46.5% say yes, 53.5% say no. So you're slightly split, but a majority for those saying that actually it's up to parents. Let's now have a look at tomorrow's Express. Always a good read. Sex predators stalking Britain's police stations. Sex predators allegedly assaulted more than 170 people on police premises, but very few were charged. Truly shocking. And also rain in Spain. Carlos is the new king of Wimbledon. Let's get reaction to all of these stories with my brilliant pundits. We have Sean Woodward, former Labour MP and ex-Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, former Conservative government minister and 5 Live broadcaster Edwina Currie, and best-selling author and ex-Labour MP Simon Danchuk. Well, look, let's see what the papers have got for us. And Edwina, The Guardian strike a note of alarm in relation to climate change, the weather. Alarm as new heat storm threatens to engulf Europe.
Well, it's partly the language of this. Alarm. storm, threatens, engulf. I mean, pardon me, if you go to Spain, the south of Spain, in July, it's going to be hot. It's going to be very hot. I mean, I would say you're crazy. It would not suit me at all.
You're denying climate change.
But it's...
Northern Italy.
No.
Yeah.
What you don't know, darling, is that I'm on my second Tesla. I've had solar panels on the roof since 1983. Right. I am totally into it. I read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring in 1962 as a teenager. I'm into it. Right. What I'm concerned about is the language of all this. It's designed to have everybody going, oh, my God, oh, my God. You know, somewhere along the line, we have to adapt to these changes.
Yes.
We can't wish them away. So let's say, look, you know, go to Spain in the winter, come to the Peak District, not all of you, in the summer. You know, come to Scotland, discover other parts of our country, spend the money at home, and then you won't have to worry about being in queues in the airport.
Perhaps they're trying to encourage people to do what you've done, though. Perhaps they're trying to nudge people into buying electric cars and having more solar panels and everything else.
You know, every newspaper does this, and the BBC does it. Alarm, terror, fear, danger, engulfing. Just for goodness sake, calm down. There are things you do to adapt. There are things you do to accept change. There are things you do... I mean, you know, my car costs a lot of money, accept that, but it costs nothing to run, or virtually nothing to run. I plug it in at home, it's brilliant. And we have to adapt to all these things. We need the infrastructure, and that's going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to take time. But please, you know, don't behave as if these things aren't happening, and don't scare us.
Edwina's gone electric, and I completely agree with you about the fear-mongering. Don't treat us like children.
Yep.
But you said earlier, infantilising us. Let's get now to your headline heroes and back page zeros. Who's smiling upon you today, Edwina?
Well, my hero is Ben Wallace, who I think has been an absolutely brilliant Secretary of State for Defence for 4 years, under, what, 3 Prime Ministers? He's been He's done an absolute zinger for Ukraine. It's been super, because even if we didn't have the kit, what we did was we went around the world and we found the kit and we got it to Ukraine, and we've been absolutely steadfast on that. It's super. We've done a cracking good job.
Great leadership, I completely agree. A loss to politics.
Absolutely.
Simon, just a few seconds for your headline hero.
My hero is Felicity Mercer, the wife of Johnny Mercer, MP. I think she's done a sterling job, very gracefully, putting up with a lot of negativity on social media.
Absolutely right. Good nomination. Sean, your front page hero.
My front page hero is the book published last week, Older and Bolder, written by Esther Ranson.
Oh, amazing.
Somebody who just been given a diagnosis of stage 4 lung cancer, but nonetheless, classic Esther, always look on the bright side of life. She comes up with now this book. It's funny. It's an A to Z of how to survive. It's got some brilliant anecdotes in. It's funny. It moves you. The way she talks about loss and losing people who mean a lot to you. Brilliant. And yet, at the end of the day, as she recalls the words of the Queen Mum, you've got to just get on with it.
Well,
it's brilliant.
She's a true icon and a legend of broadcasting. What a great shout. Just a few seconds now for your back page zeros. Edwina, who have you got?
Well, most of the Home Office. If they can spend billions and billions renting hotel rooms and all the rest of it, why can't they actually put some staff onto doing the asylum assessments quicker?
So you get them processed, put Edwina in charge. Yeah. Simon, a couple of seconds, your back page zero.
My back page zero is Carol Vorderman, who's been leading the charge against Felicity Mercer. I think she's been appalling in terms of using a TV personality status to attack somebody in public life.
Sean Woodward, Robert Jenrick, why?
Ordering Mickey Mouse to be whitewashed over in a children's centre in Kent, where they look after unaccompanied asylum seeker children. It's disgraceful and terrible, and there just for the headlines.
In poor taste, I do agree with you. Listen, loved my pundits tonight. Thank you for your collective company. Great to see all of you. Please come back soon. Most importantly, thank you to you for your company. I'm back on Friday at 9. Dan Wootton's back, and here's headliners.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you were able to enjoy your weekend. It has been a rather blustery one for many of us, but as we come to the end of Sunday, low pressure is pushing its way off towards Scandinavia, allowing those isobars to widen out, and the winds will be easing throughout this evening and overnight. Still, though, some showers lingering primarily across western areas of England and Wales, but more persistently across areas of Scotland, some longer spells in there at times as well. Elsewhere, we will see some clear intervals developing, and in those clear intervals, temperatures dropping down to around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, so a touch fresher compared to some recent nights. Where you have those clear intervals, though, it means that you'll see some sunshine first thing to start off the new working week. A cloudy affair for Scotland, but all of us will eventually see some showers developing as we head throughout the day. Again, they could be heavy in places, particularly through central eastern areas of England. Some thunderstorms and hail is also possible. But with the winds turning lighter compared to the weekend, where you see those sunny intervals in between the showers, it will just feel that bit warmer as well, highs around 20-23 degrees Celsius. Into Tuesday, our focus then turns to this low pressure centre that's going to start pushing its way in from the west. So quite a damp start to Tuesday for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then push its way into